Okay, so you guys have been asking me a bunch of hot button issues, so we want to do these short videos where I basically explain what I think of these things. These are completely unscripted. This is just coming off the top of my head, as is. So one of the things that you guys have asked me a lot about is what do I think of the refugee situation in Europe and in America? And I get a ton of email about this. You know, I mentioned once on the show, I think it was with Douglas Murray, something about the refugee situation in Sweden, or actually he probably brought it up and then I followed up with something. And I've been getting a ton of messages, emails and Facebook messages from people in Sweden that are extremely concerned about what's going on with the refugee situation there, and they feel like there's this influx of people. And we're hearing about this, obviously, not just in Sweden, but we're hearing about this in Belgium and in France and in the UK and all these places. And we're hearing about it here in the United States, although we haven't let many people in. So before I get to the specifics of that, though, I should say that, you know, we shouldn't be lost on any of us that we here in America are a nation of refugees, right? So unless you were a Native American, and we didn't treat them that well, right? The Pilgrims didn't treat them that well. Unless you were a Native American or your ancestors were brought here as slaves, then pretty much the rest of us were immigrants, right? Not necessarily refugees, but immigrants. But a lot of them were refugees. So I think, as a general rule, we should always try to be as welcoming as the system can possibly allow. So that being said, and I mentioned this in the video that I did about gun control, I don't have great trust in the government. So now we do have a problem with radical Islam right now, right? It is a problem. Okay, just saying that, I know that makes people crazy, but it is a problem. And I'm not talking about Muslims, I'm talking about radical Islam, which is a tiny percentage of these people, right? Now, if we just are letting in massive amounts of refugees without a scanning and a screening process that makes sense, because our government is pretty dysfunctional, right? As we're finding out, the San Bernardino shooters, the woman only came here a couple of years ago on like a fiancé visa or something. So if you don't trust the government to do this stuff effectively, then yeah, we're gonna have a problem. So that's why the refugee question is so bizarre, and that's why it's happening in such a bizarre fashion at the same time as guns. Because what's happening is you're going to the fear center, especially for the people on the right, you're going, wait a minute, they want to take away our guns and they want to let in people that are going to kill us. Now, of course, it's not that simple. Most of these people, the vast, vast majority, are fleeing awful terrorism and bombings and all this stuff and probably just want to come here to try to live a decent life. At the same time, it is possible that ISIS could take advantage of that, or some of these people will even be radicalized here, partly because people like Trump will say all Muslims are bad. So it is extremely complex, and unfortunately we're not really good at these extreme complex situations in America. But one thing that I do find particularly interesting is that we know that the European governments are taking in plenty of people, right? We're figuring out what to do here. We know that, unfortunately, that a lot of time the Muslim immigrants, and here I'm talking about the people, there's an integration problem, right? And you could say it's partly the society, it's partly the people, whatever it is. I'm sure it's different for each country. But, you know, one thing that's particularly interesting here is that Saudi Arabia has 3 million air-conditioned units for 3 million people that are only used 5 days a year. You can Google this, I'm not making this up. They're used 5 days a year for the people that go on the Hajj to Mecca. These things are sitting empty at a country that literally almost shares a border with Syria. Not quite, but not that far off from Syria. And no one says, well, why doesn't Saudi Arabia do anything, right? Or why don't any of the Gulf states that are incredibly wealthy, right? The United Arab Emirates and Qatar and all this stuff, why don't they do anything too? I think everybody, if we live in this world, this small world, right, then everybody should try to be a part. But unfortunately, we dumb down debate here, where it's either if you don't like them, you're a racist, and if you love them, then you're trying to destroy America. Guess what? Not that simple, yeah.